This is Newark Today, WBGO's award-winning call-in show. We're discussing the issues affecting New Jersey's largest city. And now your host, Andrew Meyer.
There are two issues that seem to be dominating the news these days: how the police do the job they're charged with doing, and how they relate to the people they protect and serve. The headlines are strewn with words like stop and frisk and civil rights. But in Newark, is progress being made on both sides of the issue? On tonight's show, we delve deeper than the headlines for a conversation on the issues. Joining us for the entire program, we are pleased to welcome back Newark's Police Director, Samuel Demaio. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Andrew.
And joining us for the first time on the program, the head of the ACLU of New Jersey, Udi Ofer. It's very nice to meet you.
It's great to be here.
And as I mentioned, this is a conversation tonight, and we're expecting you to join in. If you have a question about the Newark PD, about civil rights, about public safety, it's all interrelated. You can call us tonight at 1-800-499-9246. That's 1-800-499-9246. You can email us at newarktoday@wbgo.org. You can join in the conversation on social media at Facebook, at facebook.com/NewarkToday. And you can follow me on Twitter at Andrew Meyer, WBGO. Police Director Samuel Demaio, just last week, the department released its first monthly report on every stop your officers make. For those who hadn't noticed that, hadn't been following it, what's the big picture you found in the first month of reporting?
Well, the first month of data, it's a little hard to compare it to anything because there's really nothing there before that. We also found a couple of quirks where the way the data was being pulled out of the system was a little bit difficult to separate some of the different races and some of the different stops. And that's all being corrected now, so we should be 100% for next month.
One of those quirks I noticed is that when it comes to racial lines, it's simply black and white. You didn't have the data for Latinos.
Exactly. What we found, because we've never pulled the data out of our system before, is that our RMS system was only categorizing two different areas. Although the data was being inputted into all the different racial groups, coming out, it was only able to pull it out into either black or white. That was it. So that's all being corrected as we speak.
Udi Ofer from the ACLU of New Jersey, why is the release of this data so important?
Yeah, and first of all, and this is very important for us, I want to commend Police Director Demaio for really taking the initiative and building a more transparent police department. Transparent policing is good policing. And I'm confident that Director Demaio genuinely believes that, and his actions have shown that over the past few weeks. Last week's reporting, for the first time ever in Newark's history, of basic data on stop and frisk was historic. Before last week, the public had no sense of how this tactic is being used in our city. There was a ton of anecdotal information out there, but if we're going to build a better police department, we can't rely on anecdotal information. So last week was an incredibly important step forward. I agree with the director that it's too early to draw any conclusions. We have 1 month of data. So to draw an analogy to New York City, where there's a vibrant stop and frisk conversation right now, that conversation is based on 10 years worth of data. Because in the early 2000s, the New York City Council passed a law that is somewhat similar to the new policy issued by the Newark Police Department. The Newark Police Department's policy is actually better than the law passed by the New York City Council about 10 years ago. So last week was an important first step. It reflects a commitment by the police department to be more transparent, to be more accountable. It is a step forward, and we're very much looking forward to continuing this progress.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. We have a great show lined up for this evening. We're talking about policing in Newark, also in New York, and also civil rights, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on both. We've got two great guests in here tonight, Udi Ofer from the ACLU of New Jersey, Police Director Samuel Demaio from the great city of Newark, and of course, we want you in here. You can call us at 1-800-499-9246. That's 1-800-499-9246. First up on the program this evening is Philip from Yonkers. Philip, welcome to Newark Today.
Thanks very much. I'm really pleased to be on the program. You guys do great work. Big fan of public radio. And what a conversation, and to have both of these guests on the same show is remarkable. I wish more more people would have the foresight to invite them in and have this type of conversation. What I wanted to ask both of your guests about with respect to New York, which they mentioned in the introduction, that the reaction from both Commissioner Kelly and Bloomberg just seems so almost violent. Like, how dare you question this? As if and it's just the beginnings of what we want to avoid, everything happening being a police state. Now, that being said, and that's where I lean towards the issue of crime being cut down. I mean, when Giuliani was in there, it was like, my way or the highway, and clean it up, and people were rah, let's go, and yet artists and everybody else suffered along with everybody. So I'm not sure if there's a specific question in here. If there was one, I guess it would be what do you see as the reaction, the cause of the reaction of Kelly and Bloomberg, aside from just the data that they have to base their opinions on? Are there other insights that the two guests have with respect to how they came out so strongly?
Thank you very much, Philip. And let me get a little backstory in here. For those who weren't following the news late this afternoon, the City Council overrode Mayor Bloomberg's vetoes of two bills before the council, one of which would have set up an inspector general, the other which will make it possible for citizens in New York to sue the NYPD when they suspect there are cases of racial profiling. Right. So that backstory being said, Udi Ofer, you worked on this legislation. You have some familiarity about it. Talking to Philip's point about the mayor and the police commissioner's reaction in New York City, their really strong reaction.
Yeah. Well, first of all, folks should know that. So I've been here in Newark at the ACLU of New Jersey for 6 months now. Monday was my 6-month anniversary. Before then, I was at the ACLU of New York for 10 years. And the primary issue that I worked on over there was stop and frisk. So I've had conversations with Commissioner Kelly. I've had conversations with Bloomberg and his staff. I drafted the bills that were actually voted on today in the City Council. I was there for the override vote. It was a historic day. Comparing Commissioner Kelly to Police Director Demaio is like comparing apples to oranges. Ray Kelly just shunned community conversations at every point that he could. There were literally years of overtures from community members to meet with the commissioner to talk about their concerns, and he just did not want to have those conversations. I cannot tell you the reason for it because I can't enter his mind, but I could tell you what that led to. And what that led to was a police commissioner who should be one of the most popular people in New York City because crime is at a historic low in New York City, yet is unpopular because he has completely driven a wedge between the police department and the community. And if you talk to the patrol officers, they don't appreciate that because they're the ones that have to deal with the consequences of community resentment. So it has been refreshing to come to the city of Newark and to be greeted by a police department. Look, there are disagreements, and there always will be. It is the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the relationship.
And we'll get to some of those later on in the program.
Right. But at least we have a police director who's willing to talk and to consider alternatives.
Police Director Demaio, I want to ask you about the very term itself, stop and frisk. And I know from our reporters' own covering of the story, when it was first announced that you would be releasing the stop data on a monthly basis, they mentioned stop and frisk, and you said, whoa. It's not stop and frisk. It's a loaded term for you.
Yeah, I think that the term stop and frisk is kind of invasive into itself. Not every stop leads to a frisk. Mm-hmm. There's stops that are just ended an interview, and that's it, and the person is sent on their way. In Newark, we call it a field inquiry. And I think by calling it stop and frisk, that kind of it draws a lot of attention to the issue that's unnecessary because not every stop ends in a frisk.
So if I could speak to that. In New York City, about 50% of the stops lead to frisks. So we know that. It's still called stop and frisk. Actually, one of the deficiencies that we had in the data that was reported this month is that the data did not break down how many of the stops led to summonses and arrests, or how many of them actually led to frisks, as far as I know. In that it combined the breakdown of stop and frisk. So we don't have information in Newark yet, and something I'm hoping to get, of how many of the stops actually led to frisk, because it is absolutely accurate that a stop doesn't always lead to a frisk. However, that term, stop and frisk, is a well-accepted term. I mean, it's a term that's been used for decades. For listeners of this program, you should know that the term stop and frisk has been in use since 1968, when the Supreme Court, in a case called Terry versus Ohio, actually gave the green light for stop and frisk. And by the way, it's amazing to read that decision, and I encourage folks to read that decision, because it's almost the same issues that we face in communities today is discussed in this 1968 Supreme Court decision. So I think it's an accepted term. I hear you from the perspective of the Newark Police Department to say that because of all the outrage on stop and frisk in New York City, that may automatically reflect badly on using that term, but that's an accepted term of art. And we always tell people that, look, stop and frisk in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with it. What it is it's a highly intrusive police practice, and we need to make sure that it's only used in situations that are warranted. And those situations are where there's individualized and reasonable suspicion of a crime, you could stop someone. And if the officer fears for his or her safety because they believe the person stopped is armed and dangerous, they could frisk them. That's the legal standard.
And the point that I was getting to is that unlike in New York City, Newark has a very different approach, correct, to how it uses stop and frisk.
Actually, no. I mean,
No.
The approach across the nation is pretty much the same in every police department. It's, for us, the difference is reporting the data. And, we called all our top-level executives in the department in and presented our idea to present the data each month on our website. And everybody was, we can't do that. There's no way we can do it. And so my question to everyone in the room was, okay, why? Well, because we never have and nobody else does. I said, well, somebody has to be first to do everything. And what's the downside to putting the data out there? And nobody could really give me a good answer to what the downside was. It's information that's there. So the information, there's absolutely no reason not to put it out.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. Our guest tonight on the program, we have Udi Ofer from the ACLU of New Jersey and Newark Police Director Samuel Demaio. Got a question for either of them or both? You can call us at 1-800-499-9246. That's 1-800-499-9246. 9246. The word transparency has already come up in the discussion this evening. I imagine we're going to be hearing it quite a bit more over the course of this hour. I did want to bring in some comments that we got from people that we spoke to on the street earlier today. We talked to a few people, and one person, Brian, said he didn't agree with the department's take on actually releasing the data, and here's why.
I don't really think it's positive. I think it'll actually negatively affect the public and general society, because then they'll be seeing that all, if not most, of the people that they're stopping and profiling or, asking for IDs or investigating will be minorities.
Your response, Director?
I totally disagree with it. It gives us an opportunity to explain why we do what we do. We're going to start putting out more data, too, in the upcoming months, not just on who we're stopping and who we're frisking, but there's also data that's collected on every incident report that's taken. Last year there was a little over 13,000 Part 1 crimes that took place in the city of Newark.
Which is what?
That's our Part 1 crimes, the UCR crime index. That's from murder to rape to robbery to assault to theft to auto theft, right down the line. And in each one of those crime instances where a suspect is observed, there's a race that's listed in that report. And that's data that was never looked at before either. So what we're looking at now is who's committing crime in Newark. What percentage of each different race are committing the crimes in Newark? So if we have 2,400 robberies, out of all the suspect information, because we're making arrests on about maybe 18% of those. So on the suspect information on all of the robberies that took place where we didn't make an apprehension, who were the suspects in those robberies? Who's committing crime in Newark? And what it should mirror, the people we stop should be mirroring who's committing the crimes in our city in the different neighborhoods. And that's all data that we analyze on a daily basis.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. To get your own question in the mix this evening, you can call us at 1-800-499-9246. That's 1-800-499-9246. Our guests tonight are the leader of the Newark Police and the head of the ACLU of New Jersey. And guys, I want to point out that this conversation tonight, as great an opportunity as it is not unique for you two organizations, nor is it the starting point between organizations with a tendency to be more adversarial. Police Director Demaio, you surprised a few people a few years ago when you sat down with Mr. Ofer's predecessor for a very candid, on-the-record conversation. Was this more than just getting ahead of the possibility of a federal monitor for the department at that time?
Absolutely not. That had already started. I was named as the acting police director May 3rd of 2011. I believe it was May 4th. I was standing at a podium with Paul Fishman and the DOJ investigation was being announced, so that was already done. Probably the most adversarial agency or organization to our department was the ACLU, and I didn't know why. So we called for a meeting with Deborah Jacobs and sat down and had a really enlightening conversation as to why she thought there were so many issues with the Newark Police Department. And we agreed to disagree, but we also agreed to work together on a lot of different subjects and a lot of different areas that they felt were issues. And when we dove into it and looked at what it was that she felt were issues in the department and things that could make the department a better department, I agreed with a lot of them. And we made a lot of changes, and we did a lot of really good work together. And that's continuing with Udi.
Udi,
Sure.
The ACLU puts itself out there as a protector of civil rights for all Americans. Your organization has been very complimentary of the efforts of the Newark PD in a number of reforms. Do you worry? Do you get complaints that your group is becoming too cozy with one of the groups that you're supposed to be keeping an eye on?
Wow, I don't think we'd ever receive that complaint, and we have not received that complaint. Look, I think it's important to. I don't want to focus on the past, but let's bring some context here. In September of 2010, so almost 3 years ago, Deborah Jacobs and the ACLU of New Jersey filed a petition with the Justice Department that listed more than 400 incidents of police abuses in the city of Newark over about a 2-year period. There were examples in there of unlawful arrests, excessive force, internal affairs complaints that weren't properly adjudicated. That petition was filed because of years of inability to talk directly with the police department to address some of those concerns. All of that past predates Director Demaio's leadership. From my conversations with Deborah, who did amazing work, my conversations with current staff, because remember, I started 6 months ago, but from current staff that's at the ACLU of New Jersey, everyone has constantly told me that it is night and day since Director Demaio came on. Now, are there still things that we want to happen that are not happening? Yes, and we could talk about that. But my style of leadership is I give credit where credit is due, and credit is due right now.
Police Director Demaio, we mentioned the federal oversight. Where does the department stand in terms of having to answer to a federal monitor at this point in time?
Well, the final results from the DOJ investigation have not been released yet. We've been going back and forth, and I got to tell you, a lot of the initial findings are things that we've corrected already. The scope that's being looked at by the DOJ goes up to May of 2011. So a lot of the issues that are being identified in the time period that they looked at prior to that are problems that we identified ourselves. And a lot of changes have been made already to try to correct some of that. Right. And we look forward to. We know the investigation is going to find negative things. That's obvious. We've studied all the other cities throughout the country that have had the DOJ investigations as well, and we know what it's going to take to correct it, and we're taking a lot of steps right now to move forward and to try to get out ahead of it.
From what you've seen in terms of the work that Director Demaio has done since he took over the office, in your opinion, as head of the ACLU of New Jersey, does the Newark Police Department need federal oversight?
Here's what we believe is needed. Our worry is that there haven't been enough structural changes. It is terrific to have a police director on top who believes in transparency and who believes in good policing. We need to create a police department that's not dependent on any one director, or any one mayor, or any one police officer. So we are still very much interested, and we're going to be working on this to create structural and lasting changes that will outlast any one police director or any one mayor.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. When we come back, more with the head of the Newark Police and the ACLU of New Jersey.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to the program. I'm your host, Andrew Meyer. Newark Today is more than radio. You can now watch the program as it's on. You can find our live video stream on our website at wbgo.org/Newark Today. And if you are watching us online tonight, you'll see that our guests tonight are Udi Ofer, head of the ACLU of New Jersey, and Newark Police Director Samuel Demaio. We're going to head back to the phones now. Jen is joining us on the program. Jen, welcome to Newark Today. What's your question this evening?
Gentlemen, Newark has one of the highest crime rates in America when compared to similarly situated communities. The chances of being a victim of violent crime in Newark or property crime is 1 in about 20. Newark is also listed as one of the 100 most violent cities in America, according to the FBI statistics. I became a victim of this violence on July 15th when 2 unknown men assaulted me, stole my pocketbook, punched me in the face, while I was standing at the bus stop on the corner of Avon Avenue and 10th Street at 6:30 in the morning. I was going to work. The police report to me that at least 13 other people were assaulted the same day in Newark. What are you, the police department, and other authorities doing to make Newark a city with less violent crime?
Well, Jen, I know exactly the incident that you're talking about, and it was actually 6 different victims that morning at 6 o'clock. It was one group of juveniles that rode through the South Ward and did those robberies, and we did apprehend them. We're working tirelessly to make Newark a place that has as minimal amount of crime as possible, and we're seeing some really tremendous results. When you become a victim of a crime, unfortunately, it doesn't matter what our results look like. You're not going to be satisfied with the work that we do because you've been a victim of crime yourself. Newark is realizing now as one of the only cities, major cities in the state of New Jersey or larger cities that has a reduction in our violent crime and also has a reduction in our property crime. We do things in our agency now that are unheard of in law enforcement throughout the country. We change the face of the agency every 3 months. We do seasonal reorganizations. So there is no.
What does that mean, a seasonal reorganization?
Well, we certainly don't need to police the city the same way in February as we do in July. So you may be a detective in a certain squad within the city from January through May, but then in June you're going to put a uniform on and you're going to be in a radio car and you're going to be working 7 at night till 3 in the morning. And we did that reassignment this June 1st, adding another 75 police officers and another 15 supervisors to the 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. tour every night of the week. And what that equates to is 35 to 40 police officers, depending on days off, and 25 to 35 extra police cars in the street every night by doing that reorganization.
When something like what happened to Jen, that and a horrible attack on her and a series of other people, how responsive is the department to adapting so that not only do you catch the guys who did this crime, but also you make sure there aren't others to say, oh, look what they got away with. Now it's our turn.
Well, I could tell you the response to Jin's incident and the other 5 victims that morning. Immediately, a task force was put in place that was out in the street the next morning from 3 a.m. until 9 a.m. And the results of that were again, good results. 2 more crews of people that were out looking to do robberies were apprehended by our major crimes unit. And that was the first and only incident that took place like that. And if we didn't have that response to it, that would have continued. And that same group would have gone on future days to do the same thing.
Jen, thank you very much for your call this evening. You are listening to Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. Do you have a question about public safety? Do you have a question about the intersection of policing and civil rights this evening? We'd love to get you in on the conversation. We have the police director. We also have Udi Ofer from the ACLU of New Jersey with us tonight, and you can call us at 1-800-499-9246. That's 1-800-499-9246. 9246. I'm going to ask Udi to indulge me for just a second because I have my own question on public safety, which is actually almost a follow-up on what Jen was asking about. In the downtown area around here over the last year or so, it seems like crime has been on the increase. And this is anecdotal. This is what we're hearing, but we're hearing about increases in muggings. We see more examples of safety glass smashed from broken windows from cars on the street. We're seeing an increase in graffiti, but we're seeing more violent crime. There was a murder around the corner from here. There was a shooting out front just about a week ago. And the question is, what can you tell us, an update about, are we seeing an uptick in serious crime here in the downtown area, and what's being done to address the issue, if there is?
It's exactly the exact opposite. We've seen a tremendous reduction in crime in the downtown area, and that's being caused by the creation of the Metro Division. We now have a substation right on Market Street, just east of Broad, and a dedicated cadre of officers that work specifically out of there dealing just with this area. And it's twofold. It also allows us now, the officers that are assigned to the 3rd Precinct down on Market Street would be typically back and forth across McCarter Highway handling assignments up here. Those officers down there now are able to stay down there in the residential neighborhoods and police that area while the Metro Division polices the downtown. Crime is way down in the downtown area. There's 2 areas that are a problem. Number 1, cell phones. If you look at our total robberies in the city, 35% of our robberies are cell phones. The cell phone has just become an item that's marketable right now. You can walk into any mall, there's kiosks where you put the phone in, it scans the telephone, and money comes out like an ATM machine. It's the market for the phones, for the iPhones especially, is incredible, and that's the majority of the robberies that took place here in the downtown.
Snatched out of people's hands?
Exactly.
Is that simple?
There's strong-arm robberies where somebody gets pushed or shoved and their phone gets taken. We noticed that some of our students from the colleges in downtown that was happening too. So we created an immediate partnership with all of our universities and colleges in the downtown. I called for a summit up at police headquarters, had all of the security chiefs up there, and we started to work together. And the problem has had a significant decline. Unfortunately, there was one particular incident, the homicide that you spoke about next door here in the parking lot of the Robert Treat, which no matter how well you're doing, when an incident like that occurs, it just gives a perception that there's a problem. That incident was an isolated incident. It actually turned out to be where the person who was killed pulled the gun on the person who shot him, but they were both carrying guns. One of the things we did was work with New Jersey PAC, and what was causing the problem in this area on the Thursday nights was in addition to the sounds of the city, where after the live entertainment would be finished, which was a great thing. I mean, I've been to Sounds of the City.
For those who don't know, NJ
times.
PAC does a weekly outdoor free concert every Thursday during the summer.
Yeah.
That's what Sounds of the City is.
It's taking place tonight.
Yes.
And what had happened was there was an addition to it that was added. A local DJ would be added at the end of the night. And the local DJ that was coming on, it just brought a crowd that was more of like a nightclub type of atmosphere, and it created violence. And we worked together to eliminate that, restructure what Sounds of the City is, and since then it's been back to what it should be again.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. We are talking about crime and public safety in Newark and civil rights. Have you had an experience you want to share with us? You can call us at 1-800-499-9246. That's 1-800-499-9246. I want to talk about billboards for a second. Earlier in the week, the county prosecutor's office announced a new media campaign against carjacking. They're putting real-life criminals and their crimes up on billboards in Newark, which the prosecutor says is the epicenter of carjackings. You think it's going to make a difference, Director Demaio?
I don't think Newark is the epicenter of carjacking. I mean, we see carjackings. I get them on my BlackBerry every day. They're happening throughout the entire state. Carjacking has become more prevalent now because you cannot steal cars as easy as you could in the past. You have to take the car physically from someone. If you look at the Range Rovers, Mercedes, they all have security devices in them now where you can't steal the car as easy as you were able to in the past. The billboards, I think, are a great idea, and it's an idea that was hatched by our group, our executive session group at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Kids today think that carjacking is really, it's like a joke. They think it's the same as stealing a car, and it's really not. I mean, think of how invasive that is for someone to put a gun in your face and drag you out of your car and take your car. It might as well be a home invasion. So by putting the pictures of the people that we're apprehending for these crimes and letting the kids know that Hey, if we're going to prosecute you federally, and you're not going to go to jail in Northern State where you're with your friends and you're separated into your different gang groups. You're going to go to jail in Oklahoma. You're going to go to jail in Colorado, and you're going to go for 184 months. And this is what the penalty is for doing this crime. So when these kids are in these neighborhoods driving around and they look up at the billboard and they see the person that they know, and they say, "Wow, that's what happened to him. He's gone for 184 months, and he's in Montana somewhere in a prison." I don't want that to be me, so I'm not going to do a carjacking.
Udi Ofer, I want to get you in on this. Couple of lawmakers have raised concerns about these billboards sending the wrong message, that basically the faces that you're seeing, they're African Americans, and the campaign is dangerously close to an exercise in racial profiling. Do you have concerns about that?
So I haven't seen the billboards. I can't speak to them, but I could talk in general about the issue of how do you address crime. Look, we know from experience that harsher penalties don't lead necessarily to a crime reduction. That's just not the way criminals operate. They don't say, "Oh, I'm going to spend an extra couple of years in jail, so therefore I'm not going to commit this crime." A much more helpful way to address crime is through prevention. Now, prevention shouldn't mean locking everyone up preventively, but it means, having a better education system. If the issue is with juveniles, having after-school programs, creating a more nurturing environment. I'm not suggesting that that's not what Police Director Demaio believes in. I know that the mayor has also talked about that. But our gut reaction at the ACLU is always that is not a good use of tax resources to drive home the point that you will spend X amount of months in jail away from home as a way to prevent someone from doing anything, rather than to looking at the root causes of why someone engages, particularly when it comes to property crimes, because property crimes are usually related to poverty, and focusing resources on fulfilling those basic needs of people that won't drive them to a life of having to engage in property crimes.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. Our guest tonight on the program, Newark Police Director Samuel Demaio and Udi Ofer, the head of the ACLU of New Jersey. If you have a question for either men or for both of them, you can call us at 1-800-499-9246. That's 1-800-499-9246. You can also email us tonight at newarktoday@wbgo.org. We're going back to the phones now. Anika in Newark is joining us on the program. Welcome to Newark Today.
Hello, how you doing?
Did I get your name right?
Anika, yes.
Anika, thank you. What's your question for these gentlemen?
I'm not sure who stated the crime in downtown Newark has increased. I actually do not agree with that, and I actually work downtown, and I know that they actually have a substation on Market Street. They actually have a lot of officers out patrolling the area. I believe that crime has decreased a lot ever since that substation was actually put there.
Anika, that was me putting out the anecdotal evidence of what we were hearing, and the police director actually corrected me on it. Do you have other observations or thoughts on what you're seeing working here in downtown Newark?
Yes, I actually see a lot more officers, more timely response, less crime, because I actually work downtown, so I'm downtown every day. I've been criminalizing away with what it is they're doing.
Anika, I'm sorry, your phone line is not the best, but I think you made your point, and we appreciate your calling tonight at Newark Today. Thank you so much. I want to move on to another point that really ties the two of you guys together. An interesting development in the last week, a little under the radar, if not underreported. The Newark Police became the first department in New Jersey to tell the feds, politely, it's not going to detain undocumented immigrants accused of minor crimes. Other cities around the country have decided to do this as well. Director Demaio, why was it time for Newark to become the first city in New Jersey to do this?
Well, it was brought to my attention by Udi about six or 7 months ago when he first came here to Newark, and we took a really good look at it. And not looking at just what the purpose of the policy is, but looking at what's good for Newark. was really what made me make the final decision on it. We have a huge immigrant population here in Newark, and I keep hearing time and time again that there's a lot of mistrust, that people don't, the immigrant population are victims of crimes and don't report it because they're scared that the police are going to report them to ICE. And they may see crimes, they could be witnesses to crimes, and they won't come forward with the information because they don't feel that trust with the police department. And we want to do anything that we possibly can to build that trust. And we want to let our immigrant population, our immigrant communities here in Newark know that, we're here for you, not against you.
Somebody hearing this might think, all right, minor crimes. This pertains to undocumented immigrants accused of minor crimes. What's a minor crime? What qualifies?
Any disorderly persons offense. Someone's arrested for a simple assault. Someone's arrested for a theft. They're still going to go through the system. They're still going to go through the process. But with a minor offense like a disorderly persons, there's not a trip to the county jail where there's going to be a detaining time. It's a release from the Newark Police Department's facility here. And we're not going to detain anyone for longer than need be based on the fact of an ICE detainer.
Udi, let me get you in on this.
Yeah, so, this is a prime example of when I said earlier that Police Director Demaio is open to listening to alternatives, and this policy did come about from conversations that we had. It is not in the interest of a police department to become the arm of the federal immigration enforcement agencies. Violating our nation's immigration laws is a civil violation. It is not a crime. Municipalities and police forces should focus their energies on criminal offenses. The problem is that when you mix the two, when a local police department becomes the arm of federal immigration enforcement, immigrant communities, whether they're documented or not, because the reality is that you could have a family that has U.S. citizens in it, documented immigrants and undocumented immigrants, all within the immediate family. When you have a situation where a family knows that coming in contact with the police may lead to deportation, you are going to have communities driven underground, and they're not going to want to cooperate with police departments, whether it's when they're victims of a crime or whether they can help in the prosecution of a crime. So it is just not good safety policy. So Newark is leading New Jersey on this issue of building a wall and not engaging with federal immigration enforcement and not enforcing federal immigration laws. That does not mean, and this is an important point, that the Newark Police Department doesn't work with our federal agencies, doesn't work with the Department of Homeland Security. It absolutely does. But it has told the Department of Homeland Security that it shouldn't be engaging in federal immigration enforcement of civil crimes. And an important point and a final point is that when federal immigration authorities issue an immigration detainer to hold someone, that is not based on any legal standard, and it is not compulsory. It is a voluntary request. So what Newark did is it said, we're not going to take that voluntary request, and we're just going to reject it.
Police Director Demaio, are there repercussions for saying no to Washington on this?
There really is no repercussions. We have a really good working relationship with ICE and the Department of Homeland Security, and we're going to continue that relationship. We provide the data and information that's necessary. It's just this one part of the detainer policy that we're just not going to honor. And it's best for the city of Newark.
And I think we come back to that word. We mentioned the word trust, but we come back to another word that keeps popping up, which is the transparency, which is the citizens of Newark can look to the police and know exactly what their agenda is. It's to protect and serve, and in this case, not to be an arm of federal immigrations.
Exactly. I mean, we stress at every community meeting we go to, and we really want everyone to know that there cannot be an us and them factor in police and community. It has to be where the police department is part of the community and part of the community that it serves, and that's what we're driving for.
And just to say, immigrant communities
in
know about this policy. I mean, there was a loud cheer that spread through many communities in Newark when the police department issued this policy.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. Our focus tonight, public safety, the Newark Police, and your civil rights. When we come back, more with the head of the ACLU of New Jersey and the Newark Police Director.
The average text, takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
Back to the program. I'm your host, Andrew Meyer. There are a number of ways you can keep up with us, get the latest in what we're doing on the program on the Newark Today Facebook page. And for info about the show and everything we do at WBGO News, you can connect with us at WBGO News on Twitter. Our focus on tonight's show is on the efforts by the Newark Police and the ACLU of New Jersey to create a more open police department, one with greater acceptance and buy-in from the community it serves. Gentlemen, it's time for politics. A special election could mean, for the Senate, could mean the city will have a new mayor in October. The next municipal election is coming up in May with a number of councilmen already saying they're going to run for mayor. I am not looking for you guys to make endorsements here, but the larger picture is that there's going to be some big turnover coming at City Hall. Director Demaio, you serve at the pleasure of the mayor. There are a number of councilmen, Udi Ofer, who have been vocal allies of the ACLU's efforts at reforms in the department over the years. They could soon be off the council. How do both of you ensure that regardless of who's running the store at the Newark PD, who's on the council, who's mayor, that these reforms continue? Udi, you're up first.
I mean, first of all, I think I know pretty much everyone I know everyone who's announced that they will run for mayor. I think the city has many terrific options. We are a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse candidates. We will never endorse candidates. So we're just going to watch. But your point is an important one. And that is why we need to make sure we have structural changes. As much as we love working with Police Director Demaio, we know that his time is limited. We don't know how long, but it's limited. As any police director, we need to make sure that there are institutional changes that survive any one police director and any one mayor. And I'll give you the primary example of what we're looking for. We want to make sure that we've done a lot on transparency, and we're very happy about it. The next big need is accountability. And one of the primary findings of the petition that we filed with the Justice Department was that the internal affairs system is not working where it should be. We documented over 261 internal affairs complaints. Of that, one was substantiated. That is not normal. Now, Police Director Demaio has already made some changes, but we need more structural changes, such as a civilian complaint review board. That's one example. So we're looking forward to creating institutional changes during this administration's tenure, and we will continue into the next administration because, look, whoever is the mayor of Newark, they want a good police department, and we hope and we're going to make sure that they also want a police department that's transparent and accountable.
Director Demaio, what can you do to ensure that the reforms that you've set in motion, that you have in mind, the ones you still want to do, have life beyond your tenure, whether it's through the next mayor or a number of mayors, or if you say you get a great offer from the private sector tomorrow and you're out of here. Regardless of when and how you leave, how do you ensure that what you've started continues?
Well, one of the things that we do now that's a little bit different than the past is we don't just put out a memo or put out a directive and it goes for roll call training, and that's basically it. What we do is the training component of any directive that we put out has become much more intense. Everything becomes part of our biannual training, so we don't just tell you once, but we tell you a number of times. We tell you twice a year. What we want the changes that we make to be are something that becomes part of the culture of the agency, something that they don't do because, well, this memo said that we have to do this, but we do this because this is how we act as Newark police officers. This is how we police the city of Newark. And we do that by not just putting out memos, but we put these items out as new policy and as general orders within the police department. The general order books in our agency are what govern how you police within the city. And by making each one of these new items and changes that we make a general order and part of what we do, it's going to eventually become part of the culture of the agency. We're also bringing in a group to the department right now to change the entire way that our memo and training system works. We're going to a complete and total electronic training system where every officer in the department will be required to read the memos online, take a quiz, so then we know that they're actually reading the new memo or the new directive. And they're going to have to do that periodically as it goes on. And depending on the importance the importance level of the directive or the memo, they may have to do that every 3 months, every 6 months, whatever it may be.
Go ahead, Udi.
Just a quick point. And this may be a bit of a point of disagreement. I think directives are terrific and general orders are terrific. I think some of those directives and general orders need to be codified into law where possible. Because the problem with the police directive is that it was issued by a police director, and that means it could also be removed by a police director. It's essentially one person who can make it happen or make it unhappen.
So is that the council's job?
It is the council's job. And so one of the things that we are looking is to engage the council more in creating statutory changes to the transparency and accountability rules of the police department.
And Director Demaio, whether it's you as director or anybody else filling the role, do you have a problem with the council actually stepping in and codifying this, making this statute, as opposed to it being something internal, more internal?
I guess it depends on what the item is.
Right.
Certainly every directive in the Newark Police Department, every general order doesn't need to be statute.
That's right.
But it's something that everyone agrees upon that really needs to be a part of the culture of the department and institutionalized within the department. Becoming statute, city ordinance statute, there's certainly no problem with that.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. Our show tonight is focused on public safety and civil rights. Got some thoughts on what reforms are needed? Want to share a personal experience? Don't wait. We have just about 10 minutes left, and we'd love to get you in on this conversation. You can call us at 1-800-499-9246. That's 1-800-499-9246. And coming back to that T word, transparency, I noticed, Director, in the last month, there was an event that you were part of. You invited North Ward residents to stop by for a police strategy meeting. These are normally closed to the public. Why'd you feel the need to open up this one?
Well, I'll tell you, Councilman Ramos had come to me and says, I hear from you and from the police department everything that you guys are doing, and it's really great stuff. He was kind of surprised at how in-depth we look at crime and how we analyze it. He says, and I really don't think that the community or the people know exactly what you guys do and how hard you work on analyzing your crime and all your data. So we came up with the idea together that we would have it's more of a community CompStat training session. Obviously, we're not going to dive into the details of investigations and what's going on and names, but we gave the community from the North Ward an opportunity to see what we do at CompStat, how we analyze crime, how we analyze day of week, time of day, and how we deploy our resources based on the data that we analyze. And it was really enlightening to a lot of the folks there. And another thing we did was we went through our website. We have a really detailed website at newarkpd.org. And one of the things I created in there was I want everybody to be able to click on their particular precinct, see who their captain is, and then with one click, you can send them an email. Every one of my commanders in the city is armed with a BlackBerry and an iPad. 24 hours a day, they can respond to emails. Everybody's kind of stuck in the old system of, well, let me call the precinct desk and get a message to a clerk that goes to the captain's executive officer. And then eventually the captain's going to get the message and may have the time quickly to call back or maybe not. Send an email. We're in 2013 right now. It's the technology era. We have Twitter. We have Facebook. We have our website. Everybody's armed with BlackBerries and iPads. It's just such an easy way. And I got really positive feedback from a lot of the community people a few days after that. Hey, you know what? We had a problem on our block. We emailed the captain. She emailed us right back and told us what was going on. We made an apprehension, what to look out for. And just one other part on the website that we added, and it lends towards transparency, our crime statistics. We put them up every week for the 2 weeks back. And our crime stats for every precinct are out there. We also have a tab on there called Crime Reports, where you can go on there, put your home address in, and it'll show you every crime that took place in the parameters that you put up there within whatever time period you
Do me a favor, give the web address again right now.
That's www.newarkpd.org.
Udi Ofer from the ACLU of New Jersey. He did this for the North Ward. Should he be doing this for all the wards? And
Absolutely.
Should this be happening on a regular basis?
I thought it was, when I saw that you guys had put this together, I thought it was a terrific idea. it should absolutely be repeated. CompStat policing in particular is something that the public needs to understand better. CompStat policing has revolutionized police departments across the country. It's a very basic concept, and it's a smart concept, and that is to be able to be more effective, you need to be able to measure productivity, and you need to be able to measure trends. And CompStat policing, for anyone who's ever watched The Wire, you've seen these gatherings where the police chief, the police director meets with his or her deputies, and you talk about trends, you talk about numbers. I'm also a big fan, though, and we haven't spoken about this, of being more creative with CompStat policing and beginning to measure things that maybe a traditional police department hasn't measured. Since what we've noticed with police departments around the country is that what gets measured is what police officers ends up focusing on. So if we're really going to implement community policing, why don't police officers also start taking responsibility over kind of non-traditional stuff and kind of feel ownership over things that measurements in their neighborhoods
Such
may be
as?
important. I think there are creative examples that community members could think of, but it could be everything from knowing the graduation rate in your local in your local school, so that you feel a sense of ownership over knowing that the kids in your neighborhood are being productive, to knowing the asthma rate, to knowing the, kind of thinking about social markers, that it's not the police department's responsibility to achieve those, but that's one of the ways to gauge community safety and community growth.
And Police Director Demaio, I want to follow up on that. How much information is too much, both for a manpower perspective and also for actually tipping off the way you guys do business, tipping off the bad guys? Well,
when we did the community CompStat training session, we were very careful about what we were going to discuss and what we weren't going to discuss. And, we kind of went through it before time, and I think we hit it right on the head. We gave enough information to let the community see exactly how we police and how we hold our commanders accountable. I mean, the level of accountability in the police department today, back in 1986 when I first came on the job, I never thought that we would see anything like that. The police department is not run like a clubhouse anymore. The police department is run like a business. And our bottom line is crime and crime reduction.
This is Newark Today on WBGO and WBGO.org. We're joined tonight by Police Director Samuel Demaio of the Newark Police Department, also Udi Ofer from the ACLU of New Jersey. I want to put in a programming note here. The start of the school year is fast approaching, and coming up on our next program in September, we'll be joined by the Newark Public Schools Superintendent Cammie Anderson, and among the many things I'm sure we're going to be talking about is a new policy that they're called Zero Tolerance for Zero Tolerance policies. And it has some relevance to our discussion tonight because this is a collaboration director between the schools and the police department. Since I have you here, I was hoping to get you to talk a little bit about this new program.
Well, one of the things we wanted to do was you have school security and you have the Newark Police Department. Two separate entities, but both have the same goals and the same missions. We also went one step further, and we have school resource officers that are assigned to schools. And the way it was being done was it was different officers on different days. So what we did was we assigned 8 specific officers into the different divisions that the Board of Ed has the city broken down into with the supervisor. And what we did was the Board of Education with Cammie Anderson and our Police Training Academy came up with a whole training curriculum for them to be trained together. And it's not so much a training for active shooter. That's something totally separate. This is training on how to deal with the kids. You have a kid that's being irate, a kid that's being unbehaved. The answer is not to grab him, lock him up, and take him out of the school. The answer is, what does this student need? Maybe he needs to sit down with the school resource officer after school and be counseled on what the problem may be. Taking it to another level where the police are not just there to, okay, we're here, there's a problem, we're going to arrest somebody. No, we're here, there's a problem. What can we do to fix this problem collectively and make what's best for the student at the school?
And this really echoes, Udi, what you were saying earlier, that a lot of times it's not punishment that is the greatest deterrent for kids.
So I should say that we always have concerns, rightfully so, when the police gets involved in school discipline issues. There have been, in New York City, for example, there are 5,200 school safety officers in the schools, so police personnel in the schools. And compare that to there are about 3,000 guidance counselors. So in New York City, we saw this huge emphasis on the way to deal with disciplinary problems is with the police presence. I'm always wary when a police department becomes involved in school discipline issues without having clear guidelines in place as to what can a police officer do and what they cannot do. To give you an example, if someone on the street, if a young person on the street talks back to a police officer, maybe even touches a police officer, which they shouldn't do, clearly, that police officer may respond aggressively and say, look, I'm going to potentially arrest you or handcuff you, disorderly conduct or something. In a school environment, though, when you're in a school and let's say two kids are misbehaving in the hallway and a police officer approached and they talk back to the police officer or maybe even push that police officer, I don't believe that that should lead to an arrest in a school, because in many ways a school is this, it's a different environment, and the culture that you're trying to create is a holistic culture. I'm not saying that that's what police officers want to do, but that's what I'm always worried that a police officer doesn't have the training to be able to understand adolescent development and understand that in a school environment, what may be considered a crime on the street, even if technically a crime within a school, should not be treated as such.
We have just about 2 minutes left in the program, and before we go tonight, I want to give you each a chance to constructively criticize, give some advice to the other. You guys have a good working relationship. But for you, Udi Ofer, the ACLU of New Jersey, what's the biggest priority for you, for the PD, for the work yet to be done?
It's absolutely creating a civilian complaint review board. We've started that conversation.
Mayor Booker spoke about it in State of the City
and
address.
we started about it.
Yeah.
I think with the new election cycle, that conversation got derailed a bit for understandable reasons. I'm very interested in continuing it. It is important for us that we create structural changes that outlast any one director or one mayor. And I do believe that the next big project that hopefully we can work on together is creating a strong civilian complaint review board.
And as a partner, Police Director Samuel Demaio, what's the next thing the ACLU can do to help you realize the reforms that are going to help your department work more smoothly and help your officers continue to foster better relations with the community?
Well, number one, just the open relationship that we have now and having the ability to talk and work together and agree to disagree, that's not just between myself and Udi. That's something that transcends down through the agency. Our officers and our supervisors see that, wow, here's an agency that we were so adversarial with, and all it took was being a little open-minded, accepting some ideas that actually turned out to be good ideas that people realized in the department, and we could have a working relationship. Because, the ACLU doesn't want to hurt the Newark Police Department. The ACLU wants the Newark Police Department, in their eyes, to be a better department. And that's all we want, too. We want to be the best police department that we could possibly be for the citizens in Newark.
And your biggest challenge, is it still buy-in from the rank and file?
Buy-in is always tough. When you have people that have done things a certain way for 15, 20 years, it's hard to change. But you have to continue to drive home what we want to do. And, there's a saying, if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. And that was kind of an acceptable practice here in the department. And that's not acceptable today, and everybody knows that.
That's all the time we have tonight. I want to thank our guests this evening, Samuel Demaio, Director of the Newark Police, and Udi Ofer, Head of the ACLU of New Jersey. Our crew tonight on the show on the phones, Jim Cromaldi, Jeremy Sterone's running the board, and everything in the control booth is overseen by producer Monica Miller. Newark Today is a production of WBGO News. You can find a podcast of tonight's show along with past shows on our website at wbgo.org/Newark Today. I'm Andrew Meyer. Join us next month when our guest will be Newark School Superintendent Cammie Anderson on the next Newark Today. This is WBGO Newark.